Today's presentation is going to be on software-defined WAN, the buzziest of buzzwords lately. It is just such a super trendy term. Everybody seems to be using it. We've been involved with software-defined networking for 4 years. We're not a vendor, we're a client. We'll go into the vendor we chose, we'll go into some of the other vendors. We will have a nice little, top-down, try and keep it as neutral as possible discussion on it. My name is Joe Foran. I am the Director of IT and the Head of Privacy Officer for Continuum of Care. I'm also a proud dad. And for those who were here early hearing me talk about my kids, and these are them. And of course at Disney, because I freely admit I am a Disney-holic. So here's the housekeeping bit on it. Who we are. Continuum of Care is a social services focused nonprofit. We deal with mental health, developmental disabilities, mentally ill, chemically addicted individuals, mostly adults. We do have one youth-related program with a couple of locations. We have 46 sites currently, which is actually down from 48 because we were able to actually consolidate 2 of our administrative offices, which was great, saves us a ton on leases. There's about 800 to 850 people at any given point. We run 3 shifts. These locations are mostly group homes. So they're small offices between 4 and 10 devices. And my mantra, which every vendor has heard me say ad infinitum, ad nauseum, every dollar I spend is a dollar that does not directly serve our clients. I take our clients' privacy and experience with our organization extraordinarily seriously. It is a cause near and dear to my heart. Please see me after if you want to hear more. Oh, and there's about 500 devices. And that's the wrong button. All right. So we started out at about the same time that I came on board. We were really data starved. You can see this image here is one of my favorites. It really does help define information and knowledge. The purple circle knows nothing at the top, knows nothing about the green teardrop down at the bottom until you connect it all. And for those people who happen to be one-man shops, two-man shops, small shops, this probably also looks a little like your network closets. I know it's looked like mine at several places. Oops. So scoping this out, we had to really determine what our needs were. As a nonprofit, again, that whole every dollar I spend doesn't help our clients. Means we have our standard expectations in any business. We need connectivity, we need throughput, we need, decent responsiveness. We have to get all of our systems connected, and at the start they weren't. So scoping this out, we knew what we had to do. One of our biggest problems, and I'm sure everybody, has the same problem, is printing and scanning. Anybody in this room actually love printing and scanning? Yeah. I asked that question during our orientation because I trained the new employees. Who here likes passwords? And nobody raises their hands. Same thing with printers, right? They're just, they're awful. So we scoped this out and we determined that, we needed a wide area network. We were completely disconnected, which goes back to this. And I will slide back and forth between slide pieces here. I normally use Prezi. I like to kind of slide, so I apologize if it's bidirectional rather than unidirectional. Once we scoped it out, we looked at, let's do this on the cheap. RDWeb. It's great. We'll get everybody a desktop that, it won't matter what client they have. It can be Chrome. It can be Linux. It can be Mac. It can be Windows. It's all good. Except, of course, that how well that performs. We were on, at the time, Server 2012, because the year was 2015. And it was not a great experience. Anybody remember printing under Server 2012, R2, R1? Yeah. Remote desktop printing was hit or miss. It's gotten a lot better. My days as a Citrix guy for a little tiny consumer company called Unilever taught me to hate printers. This reinforced hating printers. It was not a good choice for us. To be honest with you, if I hadn't pulled the plug on this so quickly, I probably wouldn't be here because I would be at another job. I would not have blamed anyone for kicking me to the curb. Own your mistakes. Yep, this is one. So we started scoping it out, and we hit on the traditional idea of an IPSec VPN. Put a firewall device, standardized, because they were not standardized firewalls at all the different locations. It was a wide variety of devices. Everything from TP-Link, Netgear, Linksys, Belkin, Cisco, a couple of Meraki's. It was all over the place. So we were going to have to standardize, and we were going to have to configure that, and we were going to have to get the concentrators, and we'd have to make sure they were redundant. And by the time you're done with that, well, look at the figures. It's $3,000 to $1,000 per site. Of course, we could always just hand it over to Frontier or Windstream. You've heard me ramble about Windstream, right? At the Salt Lake? Yeah, I love Windstream. They're my favorite too. No. just no. Actually, I will say they have gotten much better over the last couple of years in my area. They're now almost as good as Comcast. All right. That was a cheap shot. I will take it again. All right, so obviously the cost on that was insane. Even at the low end, you're looking at, $700 a month. At the time, we were 36 sites. Ouch. When you start adding in features and other contracts, you're looking at, $250,000 a year for everything. That's insane. We couldn't afford it. And then we found these guys, software-defined networking. We looked at a bunch of different options, and this was when it was sort of, not quite buzzwordy yet. Not everybody had jumped on the bandwagon. Cisco Meraki hadn't even, started to overuse the term. Sorry, I do take shots at vendors. I love a lot of vendors. I am a Meraki site at the headquarters, and I love it. But, I take a few shots at the marketing as it happens. So let's define software-defined networking for the crowd that believes that cloud is just someone else's computer or computer-located unknown data center. It's just a VPN where the concentrators, redundancy and everything, the routing and all that is outsourced to another vendor. That's really all it is. It began its, excuse me again. It began its life in open source protocols. There's another vendor I'll come down to later where it was pretty prominent in gaming, believe it or not. So it has that same versatility as a VPN, but it's a service. Lets us reuse all our assets. All of our equipment can still be used. Those individual firewalls that have been configured, and we've kind of got scripts to manage them. It's a little more tedious than handling it all through a single dashboard. Well, we can still keep those, and we can phase them out slowly. Well, we're currently doing that. We're putting Untangle devices in there on a schedule. I love Untangle. Can anybody tell that I'm an open source geek? But it wasn't a mandate. That saved a ton of money. So we had to decide, and clearly you've already heard my decision, hardware or agent. Now the agent has an advantage in my personal opinion. Your mileage may vary. Anybody who uses a device that has 4G failover, like a Cradle Point device, your mileage will definitely vary. Because there may be a compelling case there where you need that redundancy, and having a hardware-based SD-WAN is your best choice. For us, it was agent-based because we have a lot of staff that goes from location to location within our network of sites. We have a lot of people who work weird hours because we're a 24/7 shop. We have a lot of people who have spotty internet on the road. So having the agent on the device gave us all the features for having that Cisco AnyConnect VPN with none of the network configuration, time, and hassle. Took a lot of time and effort off of our plates. At this point, we were a two-person shop. 36 sites, 800 and some odd people, 2 people in IT. So we selected agent-based over hardware, and we did our due diligence, and my due diligence largely consisted of the Spiceworks community. Found a very active vendor named Pertino. Anybody remember Pertino being active? Yeah, they were super active in here. Great company, startup. They were named, they named themselves Pertino after where they were headquartered, Cupertino. So we talked to them and we demoed it and we deployed it, and it was good. Now, not perfect. What's the Facebook thing? Done is better than perfect, or something like that. Finish is better than perfect. And then there's 80-20 rule. 80% of users use 20% of features. Well, we were just happy getting 80% of the features for 100% of the users. Cost was like a tenth less. It was phenomenal. We deployed it out. We spend 10 grand a year. Now compare that to the MPLS, where it would have been $250,000. That's a lot of client services that are being delivered that would otherwise be sucked up by our WAN budget. It's a lot of people getting to do a lot of things, both clinically and recreationally. Because again, we are a group home provider, and this is their forever home. This is where they live. This is, they have full, rich lives living here. We strive for that excellence, and this saving of the budget really puts an impact off of IT and back into the business. So we did this whole thing, 2 people, 2 weeks, site by site. Now, did we get every device? No. There were laptops in drawers. There were managers' offices that were locked that we couldn't get into. But we did finish the whole of the project in 2 weeks, got all the sites done. And then the dozen or so devices that we had missed came in when they called up and say, hey, I can't get to the drives, or I can't get to this app or that app. It was great. Now, I have this. So to keep it spicy, quote unquote, there are plenty of other players. The gym is full. Anybody remember Hamachi? Yeah. Early version of SD-WAN. Anybody play a LAN game over the internet with your friends on Hamachi? You were using SD-WAN. You were creating a network that was defined in software. In 2006, 5, something like that? Yeah, this is not new. And then it started getting picked up and became more and more popular. Then, of course, there's Zero Tier. Zero Tier is free and open source, as in speech and beer. So you are able to use Zero Tier locally if you want to host the devices, if you want to, basically maintain the SD-WAN yourself, which is, really you're creating a VPN. Okay, let's be straight. You're treating this like you would, having a separate sonic wall for VPN, or having a separate Untangle or a separate Meraki device that just does VPN. It's the same thing. All right, it's the same functional purpose. You can also use their My Zero Tier. Anybody here have less than 100 users who need a software-defined WAN or VPN? Who has more than 100 users who would need it? Okay, so for those with less than 100, you can use this at absolutely no cost. Over 100, there's a very, very modest service fee which covers their costs. Right now, I think they're pretty much being subsidized by venture funding, and I imagine they will be putting out premium products as time goes on. like a lot of open source companies do. Think Red Hat, you know. Then there's Cato Networks. They were our second choice behind Pertino. Really good. They have both hardware and agent. So when we were looking at them, it was a tough decision because they were close in price point. You know, Cato was a little more, but we also knew we could go with Cato hardware if we ever decided to. But ultimately, we chose Pertino because there was a cost difference. Now, funny enough, things changed a little bit later on. We'll go into that. Now, I didn't ask anybody who had come in towards the beginning of this. Anybody else using SD-WAN of any kind? Okay, so we have one more person out there. And if anybody back there said anything, I'm sorry, I actually can't see you. All right, and there's the change. Cradle Point bought Pertino. And I'm going to say they were super cool about it. They bought them, and they left their Pertino customers alone for a long time. Like, you know what? We're good. Thank you. We appreciate your business. Just keep going. Presumably because there was, you know, a lot of integration work that had to come on to the hardware side of things, because it's now an option with any Cradle Point device that you buy. So they've pretty much hit parity with Cato Networks for having a hardware device, and with Cisco Meraki, who is offering SD-WAN. You know, again, we're a Meraki shop at headquarters. We really, really like it, but the agent-based approach was more suitable to our individual use case. And I will say it again, your mileage may vary. Pick the vendor that's going to do you the best service. So we did this whole changeover because eventually they said, hey, guess what? We're changing things over. We're integrating it with our dashboard. We're putting everything together. And I will go back a few slides like I promised I was going to do. These were the original dashboard colors, and that didn't mesh, so, you know, marketing and branding changed. So Cradle Point is now a clean interface. It's, you know, modern, pretty, whatever, you know, glass sort of design. Again, I'm not a marketing guy. I don't know the proper terms for it. But they integrated it all in one nice, pretty dashboard. You go there, you collect your now Cradle Point network perimeter. You see your different networks. You manage it through there. But there was a caveat. The old stuff was going to go away. It was going to be kind of a bad day for us. So we looked at other options. We again looked at Cato. Zero Tier was out at this point. We're like, okay. We did the math. Anybody here go to Jared's session yesterday? No? Okay. He does a great bit on does the business value IT and how to make the business value IT. It was a great presentation. He talks about doing the math and calculating the hours and doing all the return on investment. You know, who here loves spreadsheets? Anybody? All right, that's cool, man. Actually, I don't mind spreadsheets. Like I said, went back to school. I'm crazy. So, oh God, excuse me. We did all the numbers, and excuse me again. It was going to cost us more in hours and labor to switch a vendor than to keep on. Wonderful. I apologize. It was going to cost us more to move to a new vendor than it would to just bite the bullet and switch our networks. So we switched. And we did it in a couple weeks. We did it with PDQ deploy, group policy, and a little bit of direct touch with remote tools. You know, the toughest part of it really was calling all the sites and getting the program managers to make sure all their devices were on. Remember those laptops in drawers? We had that problem again. Luckily, by being very proactive with the communications, there is a minimum number this time of devices that came back. And within a couple of weeks, we'd gotten all of them. So we switched over, we're on it, it's great, it's fine, it's, we've done the numbers, we've made the switch. There's a couple of additional features that were actually in there previously that we didn't take advantage of until after the switch. And I swear, I had no idea when I did this presentation and pitched this that Orange Theory was going to be here. Like, here I am talking about, bulking up and fit features and raw, and down the hall. I had no idea. Just happened to be good timing. So NAC, network access control, turn them on, turn them off at will. That's what we had used it for. Somebody leaves their position and hasn't turned their laptop back in yet. You got to, everybody experience that employee who takes the laptop and you got to hound them for a couple of weeks. Well, we had been using that strictly for turning stuff off so that you can't get anywhere. You've got a basically functioning device until you turn it in. No access to the data, no access to the network. Fantastic. We also use it now for some workers who are shift workers. We can turn off access to different sites. We can turn off, not sites, turn off access during certain times. There is an API you can script to. It's actually pretty cool. The other feature I really like is Authentication Keys. Now, we had been using a centralized user login, site name, and at our domain with a ridiculous password. Well, Authentication Keys, they're very much like authenticating an SSH session with PKI. Any public key infrastructure, it's very similar. You put a key in, it's challenge response. It goes, oh, okay, this is your key. You're installed. What's great about that is when the password policy says it's time to change your accounts, you don't have to worry about remembering to do a midnight change and change back of your SD-WAN IDs. Authentication key goes in, you're good, you're happy, you're installed. What's also nice is that you can, in the Pertino client, use that as a variable in the MSI install. So when a new machine comes up, we run our series of scripts through P2Q deploy, another Spiceworks favorite. Puts the SD-WAN agent on there automatically with the authentication key. And if that authentication key is ever compromised, we just go generate new key. Generates a new key. And the way it's supposed to work is that existing clients continue to be authenticated by it. New clients have to be re-authenticated. Gives you time to go out and change that key. You have to make sure you change that key, though. And again, I had no idea Orange Theory was going to be here. Smart zones. Smart zones are super cool. If you bring a laptop into the office for a meeting at our headquarters, and you're sitting in there, and you're on the SD-WAN, and you're going to the file server. Normally, without smart zones, you're going back out the firewall, back in the firewall. You're having that nice circuitous loop. You might as well just be jogging the river. Slows things down. Well, smart zones goes and looks and goes, no, this is local LAN traffic. I'm going to route this over the LAN. And then when you're back at your program office, you are back over the SD-WAN. Seamless, no problems. Well, some problems. We'll talk about that. Now, one of our use cases is DR. I love SD-WAN for DR. All right, anybody here a Doe customer? All right, we are a Doe shop. We have Doe BDR. And all of our servers back up to it. They go up to Doe's private cloud. Again, computer located unknown data center. Doesn't matter though. Amazon, Microsoft, or Azure, Google, whoever. When you boot up your disaster recovery test and the VMs come to life, they usually just give you a LAN, which is usually just a tagged VLAN, and access to the internet. And the rest is up to you. So you better have a VPN configured, you better have everything, rocking and rolling. Otherwise, your DR test is going to, blow its time. That recovery time objective and the recovery point objective, those wonderful metrics that DR is measured by, shortens this. Seriously cuts it down crazily, because as soon as the servers come up, they have the SD-WAN agent already installed. They're just in another program as far as anybody else is concerned. My entire data center, live, in living color, just running smooth as can be. If the pipe's big enough, people don't even know that we're running a live test. We shut it down, we test back, and again, the production servers come up, everything's fine. No one knows. We get this test done twice a year, and I'm done in like an hour. Just waiting for it to boot up, running a few scripts to check connectivity, opening up a few files randomly just because I'm a little bit retentive about it and I want to making sure a couple of apps load. Our legacy accounting app, one of those things that you got to keep around for a number of years. I believe I talked to you about our ridiculous client records retention stuff that we have to do. So in Connecticut, if a client in care dies, their entire record set has to be kept infinitely. There is no expiration on this. Now, we've been in operation since 1968. First opened up in 67, taking clients in 68. Individuals with developmental disabilities at the time, we've seen a massive increase in lifespan. But some of them are aging. And massive increase in the lifespan is still less than a person without developmental disabilities, because there are attendant other medical problems. So this does happen. We also deal with people who are chemically addicted. We have had people leave our care to go on a day program trip, or to go, they just walk out the door and they pass on from an overdose. This is a reality. So we have huge records retention requirements for this. We also have the usual, it's medical, you got to keep it for 7 years. It's financial, you got to keep it for 7 years. If it's this, you got to keep it for 7 years. So we can bring all of that back up in a matter of no time because of this. Helps greatly with audits, because the state loves to come in and audit. Nothing better than having to pull records requests at 8 o'clock in the morning because there's a surprise audit. Well, we just bring up the DR environment and we just pull from there. And I apologize for the rocks pun in there, but it really does rock. So before we go to lessons learned, I'm going to back up. There is a slide in there. I think I missed a point. Okay. Printers. They still suck. All right. I had mentioned that at the beginning, meaning to come back to this point, and I'm just going to say it. They still suck. They will always suck. I hate printers. Everybody hates printers. Printers are bad. Except people who sell printers, they love them. The one downside is if you are heavy printing, you're going to want to look at hardware rather than agent-based, because we do have to remote into another device. And we do have to control that from a computer in a small office environment where there are only a few devices and it's a busy day. There may not be one available. So we might have to kick somebody off of doing their work, entering case notes so we can fix the printer so that they can scan the email into the archival system. Yeah, it's a day. I still hate printers. If we had gone with hardware, it would have been a much easier choice, but the hardware cost was just, it was prohibitive at the time. I have this. Why am I hitting space? All right, so a couple of lessons learned. Printers, IP cameras, smart devices. One of the things that you can do with Pertino / Cradle Point, and I still do that to this day. It's been several years since the merger, or acquisition rather, and I still call it Pertino. I apologize to anybody here who's from Cradle Point. Any Cradle Point reps? I am sorry. I will call it Pertino until my dying day. There is one thing you can do to get that machine level control, and that is you can put a Linux device out there because their Linux client is also capable of routing. It's not just a client. Now, we don't do this because it's one more device, it's an additional cost, and the hourly cost for the amount of time we spend managing these devices is less than the cost of putting a client out there. It would have been dirt cheap and totally within the ROI and TCO calculations if we could have done it on Pis. I love Raspberry Pis. I also love peach cobbler, blueberry cobbler. I know, it's the obligatory Raspberry Pi joke. The problem is, Pertino does not have an ARM client. They will work on any Intel board, so you can get a cheap Intel next unit computing device and put it out there, and that works great. We use a couple of Pis out there for DNS. Anybody heard of Pi-hole? Yeah, Pi-hole is cool as hell. For those who have not used it, it is a DNS with block list. It really helps, similar to like a Cisco Umbrella, but on a much smaller scale, less feature set, more just purely DNS focused. So no ARM client means no Pi. My plate is empty. It also means no ice cream. Yes. And actually, for those of you who are here, thank you for being here. I know there is a Docker session going on right now, and I appreciate you're coming to this buzzword session rather than that buzzword session, because they are both super buzzwordy right now, but they are also both super cool. Back to where I was. Okay, so side effect if you've got dozens of smart zones. Yes, smart zones are pretty smart. They're not brilliant zones. They're not genius zones. If you have a ton of subnets with the same network ID, your typical, your public non-routables, your 10s, your 192s, and you've got those reused because maybe you didn't think about that when you were reusing all the hardware, smart zones can get confused. So you will have to, as we discovered very early on, resubnet your networks. We actually now use a site code system where our IPs, the third octet matches the site code number. It's actually good for organizational purposes too. DNS, where you've got LAN and SD-WAN, and you've got a lot of crossing over. Again, those laptops coming into the office, there's one. You've got to have double entry in DNS. The Pertino client does a lot of the DNS work for you. They even have a name feature where you can put in a friendly name, and it's such and such .continuumct.pertino.net da. But just to call it by its friendly name, you've got to have double entry DNS. For those who downloaded the zero-tier client, you will have to edit your DNS in order to use some of the demo stuff that we're going to do in just a few minutes. That's because you're really on two different networks. There's no VLANing involved. You're on a VPN or LAN. And Smart Zones kind of helps you around that, but it's not perfect. So, and we were a legacy customer with Authentication Keys, and turns out some legacy customers with Authentication Keys didn't migrate over perfectly. And when you change auth keys, everybody gets kicked offline. Oh yeah, it was fun. We changed out auth keys. It was a necessary move. And then the help desk lit up. I mean, lit up, full panic mode. We are all on deck. Luckily, we were able to push that out via PDQ through a secondary tool that we used, because we also had an RMM that was able to connect, but it was a very individual process. It took a very long time, in terms of hours, man hours. We put in a lot of OT to get it fixed. And then Cradle Point promptly said, yep, we see what it was. It's because you're a legacy customer, like a super legacy customer, and fixed it for us in no time. I will say their support is really good. There's a few people there that I would highly recommend if you're dealing with them. Talk to these particular individuals. Did I catch everything on there? So if I had to do it all over again, and this is sort of silly of me, I'm not even really sure this slide is necessary, because this is a lot of businesses now. Applications are going away, going from client server to SaaS or cloud. For example, that accounting server I mentioned in DR, that's legacy. We've moved to a SaaS accounting system. Our EHRs, SaaS-based. We no longer have an in-house EHR. The other EHR we used for one of our clinics that we've moved into our office, they're now occupied in the first floor of our building, gone. SaaS-based. We actually have two. One is through the state of Connecticut, and one is, which is called Therap. Very good for anybody who works in the developmental disability space. And the one we have currently for the mental health side of things is called Caseworthy, but we are migrating to NetSmart. We're going with their Evolve product. Anybody here ever use Evolve? And no, it's okay. Are you on the new edition, or are you on the classic?
I think so. I wasn't super involved in that.
Okay. Yeah. That's a side conversation. I can talk about NetSmart Evolve all day, back from the days when it was Defran Evolve. And good product, super complicated to do. So basically 90% of our stuff now has become unstructured file traffic. People uploading files to various locations. And even that is starting to change as we begin to migrate over, because we are a little reticent to put client PHI in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. Even though Microsoft gives an unbeatable deal to nonprofits. Literally, the E1 is $0. E2 was $0 for a long time too, and everything else is priced proportionally, and you get like a $4,000 Azure credit a year. I mean, yeah, we have good stuff that we couldn't afford because Microsoft's generosity is second to Google's. Google gives away their entire catalog to not just nonprofits, but also higher education and primary education as well. So both those companies, yeah, sure, they are kind of like data collecting, and you can knock them.
It's all about analytics.
Yep, you can knock them, but at the end of the day, client services at dollar counts, and the weight for us is heavily in favor of providing the better services. I would love to run everything on pure Linux servers, all sitting in my data center, and all Linux clients, and save money that way. But that's even cheaper. So a couple other uses that are out there. Now, anybody heard of Fort Collins, Colorado? All right, this is a cool as hell town. They put their boots down on Comcast. They're like, no. You want to charge our residents how much for what level of service? They put gigabit to the home in a municipal network. Now, yes, there's some questions there as whether the government should be running your internet service provider, and there's question, industry versus command economy versus free market economy. Yeah, there's a whole lot of politics involved in that. But at the end of the day, they did it as a business run by the city in a market environment. And Comcast went, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have to compete. Oh my God, we have to compete. So they have gigabit internet service in Fort Collins years before they started rolling it out to major metropolitan areas. Years before Austin, a tech hub, got it. Long before New York, too. One of the cool things, if you live in someplace where there is gigabit connectivity everywhere, and you've got good latency, you could actually create a hyperconverged stack that is also geographically distributed for disaster, not recovery, but disaster resistance. Continuity, thank you. My brain just went on that word. Peer-to-peer private cloud, you could call it. I mean, this is cool. Now, there's some other scary stuff in this too, because as sure as it's great for us to have this free 100 zero-tier licenses to the whole world, anybody remember what Dr. Darling's biggest red line was in yesterday's keynote? Automated weapon systems. Anybody seen the various things of, drone guns? Yeah, well, let's have a software-defined WAN-controlled drone horde that's armed and at the hands of a bad actor. Or, they have a stick of dynamite and they drop it. Like, there's some really scary uses of this. Largely, I still believe people are pretty good, and the benefits of this will far outweigh that, really fringe case that I'm talking about there, because that is kind of way out there. So you could have, your drones and robots interconnected. I actually went out and I read one of her papers called Who's Johnny? I highly recommend it. It's actually a lot of what she covered and talked about yesterday. I actually do want to email her about any research that she might have about adults with developmental disabilities and that robotic, the care pet. What was the name? I can't remember. So, I'm going to give that over to questions. No? Did I talk on? Oh, hey, I think I see someone's arm right through the light.
Does the appliance support site-to-site VPN and consider that performance increase over standard IPSec?
Yes, I have found that it is faster over an SD-WAN that's appliance-based, that's agent-based. I don't really know specifically about appliance-based from our use case. We do have a pair of Cradle Points that we have just in case one of our critical sites goes down. By critical sites, that means we are caring for an individual with complex medical needs that is power dependent and may need, phone service in an area when a storm knocks out power to be able to call emergency services. So we do have a couple Cradle Points, but we have only used them in test, and I've been less concerned with performance analytics than I have been with operational purpose. Which, thank you for giving me something to do when I get back.
Boy, how well does it work over?
We have done Teams conferencing with it. So you were asking about VoIP and how it works. We've done Teams conferencing. Now, Microsoft Teams is Skype for Business rebranded. So we know that, it's not always the most clear, and yeah, it can be a little twitchy. But we found no difference between Skype for Business and Teams on SD-WAN versus just going straight out. But again, there is that whole, it's going to the internet, it's going through Microsoft systems, so it's really not changing Internally, our VoIP doesn't touch the SD-WAN. It's on its own separate VLAN. I do notice that when I take my Mitel phone home with me and I plug it into my my PoE switch, that it comes up and it uses straight to the Border Connect gateway, does not touch the Pertino network at all. Again, that's because it's not appliance-based, we're agent-based. If we were appliance-based, I would expect there to be some loss as the device itself negotiates the traffic and where to send it. Anybody else? All right, so I guess that leaves us with demo time. Anybody who has...
And that's not so much quick. Could you please put up the information from the very beginning?
Oh, sure. Okay. Oops. Wrong one. Here's the one. Tell me when to stop.
The one from the info to download.
Yeah, the
Oh, I'm sorry. I was actually going to put that one up when you asked. I was like, oh, I got to go back to the slide. No, I didn't. All right, so there is the information for... Hello? I pushed you, I swear. All right, there we go. Is that clear? It's a little small. All right, I will... Actually, it was control plusing and minusing this, and it wasn't taking it before. I don't know if it's just because it's through the presentation. It was weird.
It's Windows.
Yeah, it's Windows. So if you're putting the zero-tier client on there, it is custom DNS is actually an AD server. It's just a little test example. Yes.
Network ID. Can't see it.
Thank you. Let me unpin that. Thank you. Sorry. It's clear as day to me. All right. So there is the network. I'm sorry it is so long. There is no shorter for that right now. 565799D8F644CB. That is a 0C. And no, I cannot remember how to do all of that in military alphabet. Sorry. So if you're not using the custom DNS, I have the IP addresses of each of the servers in question, one of which is a jellyfin. It's filled with public domain movies and TV shows and music, all Creative Commons or public domain stuff, because free is good. I don't have to get in trouble for using licenses, and when SpiceWorks publishes this up to the to their website, there's no concerns that, oh, there's, copyrighted media on there. So cover them, cover me, cover you. Anybody wants to play a little Pac-Man? It does not work very well over phones. I will say the HTML5, you got to press N to start a new game, and it won't pop up the keyboard. Don't know how it works on Apple. At least that's what happens on Android. So it's partly mobile friendly, partly not. And of course, there's RDWeb. If you want to take a look at, LibreOffice, because I was not publishing Microsoft Office, not getting into the whole licenses and cows things there. Nope. Here, have LibreOffice. It's free. So that is. I'm going to drop down just a little bit and hope you can still see the network ID. All right. Can everybody see that? Now, this device does not have the SD-WAN client, so unfortunately I will not be able to actually show it running. But if you're curious as to where all this stuff is located, the game server is a Lenovo laptop sitting at the Hilton Garden Inn in my room. And the first thought is, wait a minute, don't hotels firewall their networks? Well, it's all SSL. As far as they know, it's just, web traffic. I'm going to a secure site back and forth. I must be downloading something big. The media server is sitting on the backup redundancy line at my office. It was originally in my garage, but my Wi-Fi sucked. So I brought it in, put it on the VMware lab server we've got. And the remote desktop server is sitting underneath my desk in my office. And while you're connecting, I will be happy to answer any additional questions about it. You know, if you're curious, it took me about a day and a half worth of effort to set it up, get it working. A little longer to test it. I kept running back to the hotel and, you know, making sure it was working. I would have my phone out while I was walking to and from the hotel this morning, making sure I could get to all the sites from, you know, Trinity and Fourth. Just to make sure it still worked. Has anybody played any of the games yet? You've seen the Jellyfin server, right?
I just recognized the port. I
Oh, okay.
connected. Can you talk a little more about what smart zones really do?
Okay, smart zones are basically just basic routing is all it is. It identifies the traffic and goes, almost QoS, but without the tagging piece of it. It detects that you are in a subnet that is local to other devices with the agent. And it goes, oh, okay, you're on this 192 and they're on this 192, so you're local, and it routes all traffic back through the actual network adapter rather than through the virtual network adapter. The virtual network adapter and SD-WAN basically just encapsulates your traffic into an SSL stream over their service.
How long are you going to keep this up?
I will probably drop this tonight, I would say. I don't want to keep it up too long just because, you know, it's there, it's open, and you know what just occurred to me? Hold on. Who here has not been able to get into it? I'll bet you in my keeping it safe, I did something stupid. No internet.
No internet on your laptop.
Nope. All right. Yeah, you are getting denied. Because I wanted to keep it safe while I was building it. Because, you know, if you build it, they will come. Just give me a second to boot up. Yeah, remember that whole slide on network access control? And turning people's access off? Well, guess what? It works. Oops. Here we are. And of course, my phone is encrypted, so I got to give it a minute to decrypt. Because I turned it off. I didn't want it ringing or buzzing or anything during the session. How am I on time? We got 7 minutes. I'm going to use a very ugly web page on a phone. That's one thing I will say about Zero Trust web interface is it's ugly. It is definitely engineer designed. It's near and dear to my heart. I love it because it is so honest. Yes?
SD-WAN routes all the whole traffic for that device, or is it community routes for only certain subnets?
The Smart Zones feature in Pertino will detect where you are in relation to other devices with the agent installed, and that's as far as it goes. If you have a, if you've got static routes that are by the individual device, that will still work as well. It does not completely negate other networking. Oh, I'm glad I did turn this thing off. I've got 13 emails and Twitter notifications and wow. All right. Zero Tier Central. Loading. Login. And this is set up through my my school account, so. Networks loading. All right, so for anybody who's trying to do this, can anybody see the little check boxes that are unchecked? Yeah, that's y'all trying to connect and me trying to be safe about things before I launched it. All right, you should now be able to see it. And look, one of them's connected, called Joe's phone. Hi, that's me. Well, let me put that back up there for y'all. And yes, I know I'm a Yankee. I say y'all. I did live in South Carolina. That's where I picked it up. I kept it. All right, so those who were unable to get into it, can you get into it now? For those who can't or tried, I will 10 dot. Now the media server I use is actually Turnkey Linux. For those of you who want a really quick deployment, it's pretty good. It does take a little bit of securing. They also support Let's Encrypt SSL. And there is my HTML5 Pac-Man. Took that off GitHub, threw it into a LAMP server, just directory dumped it. All right, anybody playing the games? Anybody using the RD web? All right, if there's no other questions, I'll give you 2 days back of your time. Thank you very much.